Hello again, psychology students. So today we continue our walk through all of psychology's approaches, and today we are discussing the cognitive approach. So the cognitive approach was started by Jean Piaget when he basically started to do a lot of experiments with children and realized that their thought processes are significantly different from adult thought processes. And in doing so, started this first major wave of starting to consider, what do people think? And how might we be thinking differently? And then how do those thoughts start to influence our behaviors and our mental processes? So this one is usually one that's a little bit easier for our students to grasp, because when we start talking about why do you do things, very often you're going to go towards those mental processes that led you to a certain event. And so that cuts straight into our bottom line here. With the cognitive approach, all behaviors and mental processes occur because of your mental processes, the things that are going on in your head, that they are internal, they're private. So they can be harder to measure, but yet they're there and they influence what you do and the other things that you think about. So when we talk about behaviors and mental processes occur because of mental processes, that is not a typo. If we look at anything you do, you've had some sort of thinking process that has led up to your actions, and there are thinking processes that lead to further thinking processes. And we're going to explore that a little bit deeper as we talk a little bit more about the cognitive approach. So at its core, the cognitive approach really looks at how does the brain take in information, how it then interprets that information, and makes decisions. And so when we're looking at examples, how it takes in information and interprets information, and then makes decisions. So along with that, we'll be seeing things like your memory, problem solving, morals. All of these types of things wrap very nicely into the cognitive approach. Now, this, of course, is in total opposition to our last video on the behavioral approach, which completely denied the influence of mental processes. But the cognitive approach is going to argue that those behaviors are still happening because of something that's going on inside, leading you to make those choices, leading you to expect something to continue to happen. So, now that we get into how this can lead to things, I want us to go through a thought experiment here. And I'm going to try to explore a chain of mental processes that may actually only occur in a couple of seconds, but just to show you how your brain goes through this. So I want you to imagine, now there we go, asking for your mental processes already. So imagine that you are sitting in a line at Chick-fil-A. You're hungry, you just want some food, and you are almost the front of the line when a man comes in and cuts in front of you as soon as they call you up to the line and places his order while you are sitting there waiting. And start to think, look at where your head is going right now. You're probably already starting to do two things. You are probably starting to make an attribution. And what that means in psychology is you're deciding something about that man and why he just did what he did. The other thing that's probably going through your mind is you're thinking about the actions you should be taking next. So these are not just a single process, though. There's a lot of decision making that's going on in this process, and it's going to depend on the thoughts that lead up to that ultimate choice of behavior. So the first thing that starts to happen is, how are you labeling this guy in front of you? Is he a jerk? Is he rude? Is he dumb? Is he oblivious? Did he not know there was a line? Does he just not have an awareness of how lines work? Or does he have that full awareness and he knew exactly what he was doing and he made that decision to spite you? Or because he didn't feel like everyone else who was waiting in line was as important as he was? And from that point, you're going to start going through a whole lot of options that you could consider doing next. So what would you do next? You would probably start weighing pros and cons of, well, I could just ignore it. I could let the guy order his food and I could just sit here angry a little bit. And in doing so, there's pros and cons to that. So I get to avoid any confrontation, but I have to wait longer to get my food, and I can't express this anger that's building up within me. Maybe I could confront him. But then if I confront him, do I go up to him kindly with an, "Excuse me, sir, I was next in line. I would appreciate if you went to the back of the line because I've been waiting." Or are you going to go up and say, "Hey man, I was in line, get to the back of the line"? Now, both of those have pros and cons also. So as you are now weighing these pros and cons, well, if I confront him, maybe I don't like confrontation as much, but it might let me eat a little bit quicker. And it would save all the people behind me that are also patiently waiting in line. But then bad things can happen with confrontation. What if he starts arguing back and we make a scene? What if he actually makes an aggressive move towards me? Well, maybe I should make an aggressive move first. Maybe I could just go up and push him out of the way. But now we have another option with its own pros and cons. Well, that could wind me up in jail, and that's probably not good. And it might keep me from getting to eat even longer. But what I'm trying to draw attention to is in the course of about a second, you in that moment made an attribution, you weighed pros and cons of all those different decisions, and then only once you weighed those pros and cons and made your attribution, only then did you actually decide what you were going to do and then follow through on that decision. And that will then lead to your next steps, because the second you engage in that behavior that you decided to do, now there's a whole nother chain of mental processes as your environment is interacting with you. And so I just like to draw attention to how many mental processes you are going through on any given day. And all of those mental processes lead into how you are interacting with the world, leading to new thoughts, new mental processes, and behaviors that you're engaging in. By now, you all know what my next step is. It's time to talk about the guy who's wrestling a bear again. So when we talk about the guy who's wrestling a grizzly bear, once again, I want you to pause the video and think about and commit to an answer on why he is wrestling a grizzly bear. So you can pause now and come back to me when you have an answer. So as you are looking at your responses, you need to make sure that you're actually engaged in some sort of mental process, a decision that he made that led him to wrestle the grizzly bear. So these can vary widely, and that's okay. But what I'm looking for when I'm looking for a cognitive approach answer is, was there a conscious decision that shows a chain of mental processes? So maybe he decided to wrestle the bear because he wanted to impress the people in the audience. And so there we have a decision that he chose to do, and therefore, and the cause behind that. Maybe he feels like the audience is being threatened and therefore he needs to protect them. And so therefore he chooses to be the hero who's going to go and save everyone from the bear. Once again, that would work because we're talking about a choice he's making and a thought process that's leading up into the decisions that are making. As always, if your answer is significantly different than that and you want me to take a look at it, or if you just have other questions about the cognitive approach, please reach out. And please tune in to our next video as we continue the look at all of psychology's approaches.